Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Zenex Sock Podcasts. Today, we are very pleased to have Heidi Anderson, CIO of Prestige uh, Financial Services. And to start with, Heidi, why don't you introduce yourself and talk about your roles and responsibility at Prestige?
Sure. I have been at Prestige for 4 years now. I am the CIO, but within my purview, I have CIO, CISO, CDO, and CTO. So I own everything from the operations side of the house to I have to wear um, the CISO hat to all of product development, software engineers, data engineers, and so I have a unique role that spans the gamut of pretty much all roles in technology. And so it's been a very fun year. This is my third official CIO role. My first one was more of a business unit CIO. Second was the CIO for the state of Utah Judicial Branch. And then I have spent the last 4 years here at Prestige. Our big things that we've been working on, of course, is we had to shore up the system from a security standpoint, but we also have been working on some really amazing, great, innovative AI functionality to improve the organization.
Well, that means a lot of experience that we can talk about the different aspects of that. But I want to talk about, and this episode is about leadership and the challenges of the IT leaders in a fast-growing and changing environment. So maybe we could talk about the challenges that you've seen in the financial services industry throughout the years, and particularly, with the AI and what you said you had a lot of experience with AI. So maybe you could touch on that a little bit. What challenges have you had in the past? What challenges do you see up and coming, particularly with AI having such a big influence on everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing in AI is that there's one big watch item to me, and the watch item is that there are new vendors coming at you every single day that are explaining to you that they are experts in AI and they can take you to the next level in AI. And that's just not possible. AI has been around for a lot of years, but the Gen AI is what people are really trying to, say that they're experts in. Well, it's really so far in its infancy that there are very few people who really can say that they're experts in it. So I would say one of the biggest challenges as a leader is to be very careful on vetting who you're going to use as a partner to help implement, because you're going to have a partner at least at some space to implement any of that. The second thing is we implemented what we call an AI first strategy, which meant I was going to open it up to everybody on the team to say, okay, here's the tool set in which we have, and I'm going to challenge every one of you to figure out how you can utilize, whether it's Copilot or GitHub Copilot or, building some AI applications, or, even just as simple as recording note takers in your meetings to be able to make good decisions and take an AI first approach. So we implemented that, and then we really gave people the ability to try. We didn't give anybody any grief if they failed, and we leveraged everything we could build, and we really got some great stuff out of that, along with utilizing, a bigger partner. We're an Azure shop, so we used a lot of Microsoft products. So we got a Microsoft, gold certified partner to be able to help us implement kind of our big version of AI.
Well, there's a lot of that uh, to dig into. So you said you talked about, hey, empowering the your team to go AI first. Uh, what does that mean in actual execution? Meaning, are they using private tools, public tools, both to do everyday tasks or to build systems for the organization? Can you dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the role, right? And we did do everything that was locked down private because we did set up security protocols within our environment. We are using Microsoft Copilot, an enterprise version. So we did kind of lock it down to say this is the tool you can use. In our software engineering space, we used a GitHub Copilot private to us so that they could actually develop in that. And we didn't just send people to the whims. What we did is we set them up in groups and said, let's brainstorm and let's figure out things that will work. So simple things like a business analyst and product development. They were doing a lot of meeting with people, gathering requirements, turning around, writing them, implementing them into Jira, and then going back and meeting with developers to explain to them what needed to be developed. We found that by utilizing the tools, getting the answers that we needed, having the notes taken appropriately, we were not losing things in translation between that initial meeting with the business into the developer. So we got some efficiencies. That one's a little hard to measure, but we got a lot of efficiency just by getting things more accurate to the developer who could develop. And then in GitHub Copilot for our software engineers, we had them, even doing things as, quality checking their code. They were using GitHub to document their code, which actually does a pretty good job of it. And it honestly is one of the engineers' least favorite jobs to do. They
Yeah.
would much rather develop and send it into the whim. But for me as a leader, when they leave, I want to know what the heck was written, right? I want to know that. They also could do unit tests within GitHub, would help them do that. Some of that stuff could span all the way down to the QA folks to be able to execute some of those automated tests. So there was a lot of work that was done within the organization to be able to make the technology organization more productive and higher quality.
Yeah.
So, and we did that everywhere from operations. So everything from desktop, building out desktops. We had a virtual environment, so we built all of our builds using Copilot to figure out how to make those pipelines. The individual that I had put in that work had not done that before. So I says, I'm going to give you all the freedom to figure this out and build something. And it's funny, we set a limit on how many tokens they could use on their Copilot license.
Yeah.
And he got so excited, he just exceeded the number of tokens. So I teased him a little bit. I'm like, you might not want to go straight to the most expensive tokens. Let's start a little lower. And he says, but I'm building transformational things. It's amazing. And I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, I'll give you some more money to figure this out, right? But it was a lot of fun to watch these people. And this to me is such a big thing from a leadership. I gave people the tools and I also celebrated them for the things that they were capable of doing. And they would be just cheering at the top of the rooftops, going, look what I built. Look what this helped me do. Look what I was able to do. And, these were some of these things. And we did build applications, and we can talk about that at some point. But some of these, for me, were really a place to get them excited about using AI. There was a lot of vibe coding going on. There was an entire group of developers that would sit in a room and just talk to each other while they were building things so that they could get up to skill. Because it's not something like you really don't have a lot of classes. I mean, they're coming out now, but when we started the process, there really weren't a lot of classes and things where you could figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
So we said, let's just go. Let's figure it out. And we will use a partner that we can ask things of to help us build something a little more tangible for the organization.
So when we talk, when we think about financial services, there's a lot of stakeholders in that ecosystem, right? It's not just about IT. And there's an issue of trust across that ecosystem, whether it's
Of
the
course.
consumer, in your case, you have auto financing. So there's the consumer trust. Then there is I would say, the funding organizations. Those are probably some of your stakeholders in this, and of course you've got internal stakeholders. How do you establish trust across a large ecosystem with different interests? And IT, and now with AI, is at the center of it.
Yeah.
And you got to make sure everybody's happy, everybody has confidence to come to you, and they know that the outcome is safe, secure, and reliable.
Yeah. So I'll tell you when it comes to building stuff like outside of my business partners, because I have two sides of the business that I really deal with. One being the lending side of the house, which is all of the dealerships, all of the loans coming in, underwriting that. And then the second side of the house is the servicing side of the house. And so I have to look at what their business problems are and see how best I can solve for that. That became easy for me over the 4 years because I did build a tremendous amount of trust and good relationship with them, A, by listening, and B, by providing results. And this was even prior to AI. So I had already achieved some goodwill. Now, when it comes to the AI and the implementation of AI, to me, I think your biggest advocate and where you need the most trust is within legal and compliance. And I feel very fortunate to have had like a really great compliance officer, and our general counsel is amazing. And he always would err way more conservative than I would.
Mhm.
But, he's the one that's going to have to defend it if we do something wrong. So on occasion, I would challenge, hey, don't you think we could push it here or push it there? If he stood his ground, I absolutely did what he needed to do. And when we went to implement things out, the first thing we did is we had whichever the business partner was that we were implementing right there testing with this. And then legal and compliance going in and testing everything with us. I didn't rely on my team to say it was good enough. I used them because they're the ones that are going to have to sign off on it. And they're the ones that are going to have to defend it if I do something wrong.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to do any of that without their support.
So it's a team approach. It's about getting everybody involved and having full transparency about how you're building something across the entire enterprise so that all the stakeholders, particularly the people in charge, such as
Yeah.
compliance officer, are
Yeah.
giving their blessing to
Yeah,
proceed.
yeah, and I think the other thing that I think we did a good job on, but it was not always easy, and we couldn't do it in every scenario. But we found areas where we could implement AI and make some changes where we had some pretty concrete, measurable pre-AI stats where we could go in and build something and then we could show this is the actual improvement. And I think the first one we did, there was some tasks that were done on the servicing side, and each of them were taking approximately 4 minutes a task. And after we implemented, and it wasn't just AI, it was AI and some application efficiency work to really streamline and help how people did their work and prioritize their work. We took it down to about 37 seconds a
Ah,
task,
wow, that's
which
amazing.
is which is amazing. And so we were able to, my business partner, she goes, there's no way. There is no way that happened. And I'm like, oh no, let's look. And I said, I want you to double check my numbers. You tell me whether I'm right or wrong. And so she double checked it. She had one of her VPs check it. She came back, she goes, you're right. It is that much better. Now, this did not solve everything, but it really buys a lot of trust with people when you can actually find and measure that.
That's really awesome. Um, I'd like to change the gears a little bit and talk about security because obviously, as a financial service organization, security is probably up there as
Yeah.
a priority, very important in financial services. Uh, my question is, you know, there is a lot of threats out there now, particularly as the threat actors, the bad guys, want to use AI with deep fakes to get in and do damage. Um, what is your take on that? Your past experience and also today with the newer technology. How do you balance the needs of the organization, the speed by which this is changing, and the ability to put in the right tools so that the organization is protected and the consumer is protected, and therefore the whole ecosystem is protected.
Yeah. Well, I do think that, security is very important to me. And me wearing all the hats makes that even a tougher job, right? Because there is a balance on development, there's a balance on operations, there's a balance on security and keeping the business happy. What I will say is that, we didn't take any risks that we couldn't afford to take. We implemented as many tools. We did a lot of testing with the organization. We stayed on top of security events to find anything out that was new in the threat landscape. We had vendor partners that we utilized to help do that. And I also believe it's never just one partner, because you want to make sure that you are balancing, because, one tool, one partner, not enough. Security, not enough. So we had security in the operations space that was one vendor. We had another security vendor that sat in the code space that actually was constantly scanning the code for anything new that came out. That was a pretty cool tool. And then we had an outside third party partner that would do scanning that was above and beyond. And they were leaders in the industry. So we really did a lot of that. And we actually outsourced a lot of things all the way to XDR, because that would help us, have a bigger breadth of expertise. My security team was not large, so I had to utilize partners and software and vendors and all of the above.
Well, that's very typical because you want to focus on your core competency, right? Most organizations don't want to have, they cannot build a 7/24 operation for security. They cannot hire and retain security staff, subject matter experts. And, most organizations want to be able to focus on what they want to do, what they do best, in your case, financial services. So it's very common to outsource those security services to the outside partners. Having said that, what are some of the areas in security that you implemented that, let me rephrase, what is, if you were to advise some of our listeners here and they're saying, okay, I have limited budget, but I got to start somewhere, I don't know where to start, what would be your recommendation? What are the, let's say, top three security steps that they have to take or tools that they have to implement to get the most bang for the buck and be able to have the essentials, the most important security tools in place?
Well, I would say the first thing I would do is that whatever the organization's collaboration tool is, that collaboration tool does have some security posture in it. You have to get that implemented and set up, and you have to monitor it. So as an example, we're a Microsoft shop. So we have Microsoft 365 across the organization. So we've implemented all of this Microsoft security tools on top of that. That comes with your platform. That's one of the better bangs for your buck. It is not what's going to save you, but it's definitely important. Getting as close to zero trust, implementing your patching standards and qualities, making sure that those are in place and they're automated. Implementing testing with your users, and that testing you don't build a test and then roll it out every year. You change that test every year or every few months, however often you want to test, to include things that are newer in the landscape. And then I used to be a proponent of building everything, but I will say that finding a SOC as a partner, an XDR or whatever level you want, that is actually a very cost-effective way to keep your organization protected, especially at my size. I'm mid-market. If you're Fortune 100, you probably have enough people to be spending all day doing this. When you're mid-market, you do not.
Yeah, exactly. That's precisely what we're seeing also. Of course, us being SOC and SOC as a service and being 100% agnostic and uh, totally understand it. We see that day in, day out. So, I acknowledge that and thank you for that comment. Now, when it comes to um, partnership with, let's say, a SOC, for example, how do you set up KPIs? What is your expectation of for example, a SOC partner? And that actually goes with other vendors as well. But I'm focusing on that because obviously we have a lot of experience in that, and I want our audience and our listeners to actually kind of learn from that. How do you establish KPIs? How do you establish goals and objectives? And how do you monitor it? What's important to you? And how do you want to receive that from your partner to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do? After all, some of the cybersecurity stuff is kind of behind the scenes and it's not very obvious. So how do you make that tangible results rather than, oh yeah, we're doing our job?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for a SOC to sit and tell you they're doing their job. But if you're not giving me monthly reports and you're not giving me recommendations, because, my SOC doesn't own my environment. My SOC does not own the patching. I own my patching. I own like the implementation of a lot of the things. So there's a couple things. One, you better be identifying any CVEs in my environment that you see. You should be trying to brute force attack me to see what you can get into. You should come in and an internal, almost like an internal threat, and do an assessment to see if you find any external passwords. You should be proactively doing those things, because then you can tell me whether I've got stuff controlled. Everyone has a weakness within their environment that they will be incapable of seeing. So I need that SOC to be doing that for me. I also need them to show me what they've blocked effectively. And then I will tell you the easiest way to get ousted out of my environment as a SOC, which is probably a better metric than anything, is if I catch something before you do.
Well said. Well said. In 13 years that we've been doing this, we've never had any of our customers experiencing a breach, and that's what I always tell. I'm so glad you said that because that's our experience as well. In fact, I've talked about this in some of my. I speak at industry shows and conferences, and I said it's better. And we just did a video and put it on our website that talks about that. We better catch it before you do, right? It's a very well said. Also, on top of that, what I have recommended to a lot of customers, I said, look at your mean time to detection and mean time to resolution. It's very telling, but most organizations, or I would say SOC organizations out there, don't have the reports to explain that. And that's one way that I would recommend to our listeners to look for that. Look for reports that shows how the SOC is performing. Are they giving you the information for you to analyze? Are they detecting in a timely manner? And are they responding in a timely manner?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I have ousted one for me finding more than they found, and I shouldn't.
Yeah.
I
No,
shouldn't.
100% agree. 100% agree. So I want to look forward. What's gonna, in the future? Could you share some of your insights about what the future may hold for IT, security, in general, leadership, right? Everything is changing. Obviously, AI and the speed by which IT is changing and the speed that the vendors are producing new products. What does that do to IT? If you had a crystal ball and you looked at the future and say, oh, this is what I'm seeing and this is what I would like to have, what would that be?
Well, I think in the future it would be way nicer to be able to better detect what's real and what's not real from an implementation standpoint. Because with the AI landscape that's coming in, there's lots of promises being made. And for me, for the number of years I've been in technology, that causes me more pause than excitement, which is why I'm very picky on how I select a vendor, select a SOC, select these things to move forward with. But I do think that, and I spoke at a conference this last week, and one of the things I've said, if you're not embracing it and you're not implementing it and you're not almost to the run from a crawl, walk, run, then you're probably behind the eight ball. And you need to be willing to know that a lot of this stuff is really good. There are some really good tools starting to come to light, that people are talking about that I do think have a lot of promise in security, right? That they're getting in front of these things. They're helping automate and do that. So I just think that there's that our roles are going to look differently. Our roles as a CIO leader is really going to be more about, working with people and culture, because your people are still going to be a big problem. Working with people and culture, working with the business, making sure that we're doing everything we can to embrace and enhance. And I also think we become more thought provoking. We now become paid for not what we know, but for being thinkers and strategists around what is the art of the possible instead of what we've always known.
Right. Yeah. Um, we're kind of running out of time, but there's one topic that I want to talk about, giving your industry financial services, and it's about supply chain and the risks of the supply chain. One of the areas that I've been asking and talking about is, for example, the APIs that are, given that the cloud is providing services out there that could be three, four, five levels down the line, where somebody uses somebody's service, who uses somebody else's service, who uses somebody else's service, and they're all APIs connected,
Yeah.
then there is a risk of vulnerability within an API that then the hackers can, go through that API vulnerability and eventually land where they want to land, and that's a big problem. That's an example. In general, what is the nature of supply chain that you see in financial services that at risk, and what does this digital transformation could do to that supply chain risk?
Honestly, like it's a huge risk. Even securitizing, like you're saying on the API piece, and making sure those connections are tight and secure and encrypted at all levels. It's, I think that there's a lot of things from the supply chain where you may have implemented everything that you're supposed to implement, and you've got documentation that says that your supply chain has everything implemented the way you'd expect it to be implemented. Some of that is very difficult to validate. And you become just as much at risk from their open holes as you would be in yours, because you've given them access into your environment to do what you can. One of the things we've done is we've really kind of tightened down, even on an API level, what someone can actually touch. If you got in and this is the only small chunk of something that you can get into, and that little piece of data or that little, piece of information is the one that's at risk, and then we have to scan it before we send it in to make sure that we've almost double checked some of that. And that's not always the easiest thing to do, and some of the overhead on that gets expensive.
Exactly, exactly. That's our recommendation as well as a SOC. When we look at supply chain, that's we always say, make it tight, shut down anything that a particular application does not need. Shut down the ports, shut down the users, shut down only allow authorized user to come in, and even at that, double check and triple check that it's the uh, right authorized user, whether it's a service or user coming in. And you're right, it is expensive, it is difficult to do, and it's a big overhead. How many of those can you do as the API set changes, as the
Yes.
services change and go to the cloud, and then all these connectivity across multiple applications? So it's an ongoing battle, and a difficult problem to solve. Yet, as professionals, we have to do this. We have to think about it,
Yes.
and we have to be open about it. We have to talk to everybody. The risks are there. Just be
Yeah.
careful with those risks.
Well, and I think probably the other challenge to that right there is that that is not an easy thing to get your CFO to understand why they need to spend the money doing that, right? So that's the other challenge to that is that that's expensive and they want functionality that's going to bring in dollars to the business, not this that's going to protect it. Although they all get it. I mean, everyone that has I have worked for is very clear that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and we have to do everything we can to minimize the when, and avoid it as best we can. But it gets expensive when you go all the way to zero trust and as tight as you can.
Yeah, it is very expensive. And I always say we can get you there 99% of the time, but that 1% is totally unknown to everybody. And we don't know what's going to happen. So we are very open about it, and we encourage people to actually openly talk about it, because the worst thing that could happen is this misrepresentation, not misunderstanding of what everything is secure. Now, everything is impossible to make everything secure, because the dynamic nature of what's out there and what's changing, the ripple effect is there, and the
Yeah, I
risk.
think it's impossible to stay ahead of the game
Yeah, that's all.
because there are people who are working on threats that those of us who've been in the business for a long time have never even thought of or considered.
That's correct. In fact, we are seeing over the past few months, we are seeing very sophisticated attacks that are not even detected by endpoint protections and
Yeah.
anything else. You got to look at the enterprise as a whole and see what's going across the enterprise to figure out what's going on. So there's not one single tool that allows anyone to protect them. It doesn't exist. There is no silver bullet in all of this. You just have to look at the entire enterprise, all the activities within the enterprise, to detect that one attack that could cause a compromise. So
Yeah. And I think you should always pause with everything. Like a system has a weird glitch, you pause and you investigate it. What was this? Right? Like you have to take it as an approach of, I'm going to look at this as if this was potentially something and make sure I have, kind of crossed everything off, ensured I understood why that happened
yeah.
because you
Well,
never know.
Heidi, thank you very much for your time today, for sharing your insights, valuable insights. Having a CIO with your level of experience and your very transparent conversation about your challenges and actually,
Yeah.
accomplishments. We really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it, and hopefully we'll have you with a follow-up conversation at a later point, maybe 6 months or a year down the line, as we build additional services, tools, and things like that, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, to see what has happened uh, after this conversation. Well, thank you so very much for being with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.